Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered. The votes ordered objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1223.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1223, a bill to require a plan to improve the cybersecurity and telecommunications of the U.S. academic research fleet and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from California, Mr. Fong, and the gentleman from Virginia, Ms. Sabrianam, each will control 20 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 1223, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr.
The
Speaker,
gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong support of my bill H.R. 1223, the Accelerating Networking, Cyber Infrastructure, and Hardware for Oceanic Research Act, also known as the Anchor Act. I urge my colleagues to support this bill because it addresses a critical and urgent need, safeguarding the integrity of our nation's academic research fleet and ensuring that the valuable data collected at sea remains secure from emerging threats. This is about protecting the future of American science, innovation, and national security. Our research fleet is a cornerstone of America's scientific advancement. Since the 1960s, these vessels have supported federally sponsored missions that impact everything from human health and energy development to ocean hazards and national security. They are laboratories at sea collecting data that fuels critical decision-making here on land. However, these ships face modern challenges. Right now, they lack the secure cyber infrastructure needed to protect sensitive data and communicate reliably across global networks. That leaves them vulnerable to cyber threats from foreign adversaries, which have been on the rise and will continue to evolve with emerging technology. Data is the heartbeat of scientific progress. It informs policy, it drives discovery, it strengthens our ability to respond to crises. We need it to compete and win on the world stage. We must ensure that this data is protected, that our researchers have the tools they need, and that the outcomes of their work remain in secure hands. The Anchor Act directs the National Science Foundation to create a comprehensive plan to upgrade the cybersecurity and communication systems on these vessels to add another layer of protection where it's desperately needed. I'd like to thank my co-sponsor, Representative Haley Stevens, for supporting our bipartisan effort to protect our nation's scientific edge and security. Today, let's take a critical step to safeguard our research fleet, protect our data, and secure the future of American innovation by voting in support of the Anchor Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back. I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Anchor Act. The U.S. academic research fleet, the ARF, is made up of an impressive array of marine research assets, and even more impressive than this fleet is the invaluable research that it conducts. This diverse fleet is managed and operated by a diverse group that includes the NSF, the Office of Naval Research, Federal Research Laboratories, and U.S. universities. These fleets have unique cyber infrastructure and networking challenges and vulnerabilities, and so this bill would require an assessment of the equipment and personnel costs and time requirements needed to upgrade the fleet and develop a proposal for funding these upgrades. So the House already passed this bill by a voice vote last Congress, and I hope it'll do so again. This technological struggle has been a real detriment and had a real impact on these fleets. So I want to thank the sponsor of this bill, as well as Ms. Stevens, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting it. And I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman in reserve and the gentleman from California is recognized.
I will yield as much time as he may consume. The gentleman from Texas, the chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Dr. Babin.
The gentleman is recognized.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to be here to support H.R. 1223, the Anchor Act, sponsored by my colleagues, Representatives Fong and Stevens. The Anchor Act tackles the critical need for improved cybersecurity across the U.S. academic research fleet. This fleet of 17 vessels carries out vital research in diverse marine environments, from the Great Lakes to the polar regions. The groundbreaking research conducted aboard these vessels has largely shaped our understanding of the ocean. Scientists study ecosystems and food webs, offshore energy resources, wave dynamics, natural hazard forecasting and response, and the deep ocean floor. These scientists and technical experts operate a wide range of specialized equipment, including deep towing systems, underwater cameras, and state-of-the-art acoustic sensors, often sailing to some of the world's most remote locations. Ensuring secure and reliable communication and data transmission systems, regardless of location, presents a unique challenge. Each vessel needs tailored cybersecurity infrastructure to safeguard its scientific equipment and protect data, both on board and during transmission to shore. Unfortunately, the fleet currently lacks the necessary infrastructure. This bill would change that. The Anchor Act directs the National Science Foundation to develop a plan for much-needed upgrades to the academic research fleet, including cybersecurity enhancements and modernization of telecommunications equipment. This plan must consider the type of research conducted on each vessel, the location, any specialized equipment, and network bandwidth needs. It is essential to protect taxpayer-funded research conducted by the fleet from nefarious actors. We have made significant strides securing research at our agencies and university campuses. Now we must ensure the research being done off of our coast is fully protected. I commend my colleagues for their efforts on this issue, and I urge my fellow members to support this bill. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that Dr. Babbitt control the remainder of the time.
Without objection. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time to speak on this bill, and I am prepared to close. I yield myself the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to enter, with unanimous consent, a letter dated January 30th, 2024, titled The Institutional Support for U.S. Academic Research Fleet Cyber Infrastructure.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank again Mr. Fong and Ms. Stevens for their leadership on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 1223, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The U.S. academic research fleet enables us to use state-of-the-art equipment worldwide to conduct cutting-edge science that cannot be performed on land. This fleet is a key factor in making the U.S. research enterprise a global leader. However, our leadership is currently at risk, as it is widely recognized that our adversaries are willing to compromise, to undermine, or steal our research. They aim to exploit our discoveries and surpass us as leaders in global technology. We cannot afford to let that happen. To continue making groundbreaking discoveries, we must equip our research vessels with the cybersecurity infrastructure necessary to maintain the integrity of their data and their equipment. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1223? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed.
Mr. Speaker, I object on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 1453.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1453, a bill to amend the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to require reporting regarding clean energy demonstration projects and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Sabraminiham, which will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 1453, the bill which is now under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1453, the Clean Energy Demonstration Transparency Act of 2025, sponsored by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Carey. This sensible legislation will provide Congress with the necessary tools to effectively oversee the Department of Energy's DOE growing number of large demonstration projects. DOE established the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, or OCED, to carry out the technology demonstration projects authorized in the Energy Act of 2020 and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. These projects include bipartisan initiatives like the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program and the Long Duration Energy Storage Demonstration Initiative. This bill requires the Secretary of Energy to submit semi-annual reports to Congress on all demonstration projects managed by OCED. These reports must include details on contracts, milestones, schedules, funding profiles, and cost-share agreements. Historically, DOE's applied energy offices have managed these programs, ensuring a seamless transition from basic laboratory research to applied field work. However, with the creation of OCED, these activities were placed in a new office, separating critical expertise and adding an unnecessary layer of bureaucracy. At the same time, the Infrastructure Bill and Inflation Reduction Act appropriated over $27 billion to OCED to fund these projects. This combination of organizational restructuring and a large influx of funding should raise concerns for every lawmaker of this institution, considering DOE's past mismanagement of demonstration projects. Since its inception, OCED has been slow to award funding and has struggled to identify unique capabilities not already addressed by the applied energy offices. Congress lacks adequate safeguards and the capacity to conduct rigorous oversight over OCED and its demonstration projects. For example, when the SST committee sought more information on DOE's decision to waive the cost-share requirement for a multi-million-dollar project, the department was not obliged to document or justify its rationale. Requiring DOE to submit semi-annual reports will provide Congress with crucial tools to protect taxpayer dollars, hold OCED accountable, and ensure that projects are based on merit rather than crony favoritism. I thank Representative Carey for his continued leadership on this issue, despite no longer even sitting on SST committee, and Representative Riley for his work in advancing this bill forward. I urge all of my colleagues to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. And the gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the Clean Energy Demonstration Transparency Act as well. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, as mentioned, established a first-of-its-kind Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, and this new office was tasked with coordinating the Department of Energy's large-scale clean energy technology development. This office is now managing more than $25 billion in funding to help scale emerging energy technologies that will help us tackle our most pressing climate challenges and achieve net zero emissions as quickly as possible. Last October, one of the initiatives supported by the office awarded $1.1 million to a Virginia company, Roanoke Cement Company, and they're working on a project that for the use of clays to minimize the use of carbon-intensive components in cement production. This project has the potential to decrease carbon intensity of cement production by around 83%. Cement production is responsible for 2% of energy-related CO2 emissions in the United States, so an 83% reduction in cement carbon intensity is very valuable. And so this bipartisan bill authorizes simple and streamlined reporting requirements on the activities of the office, and it's a great transparency bill, and so I encourage my colleagues to support this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1453, the Clean Energy Demonstration Transparency Act of 2025. I introduced this common sense bipartisan legislation last Congress, which passed the House by voice vote. With more than $25 billion in federal funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and annual appropriations with the Department of Energy's Office of Clean Energy Demonstration aims to support first-of-its-kind commercial-scale demonstrations and deploy them at valuable and market-ready levels. My bill requires that semi-annual reports to Congress on the status of these clean energy demonstration activities. With these reports, Congress can oversee these projects and ensure that taxpayer money is spent wisely and effectively. Amid unprecedented federal spending, soaring national debt, it is essential that we pass this legislation to avoid more federal government waste. Overall, H.R. 1453 is a good government bill that improves accountability and transparency for the benefit of the American taxpayers. I would like to thank my colleague, Representative Riley, for being a great partner on this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas.
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I am prepared to close, and I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time to speak on this bill, and I am prepared to close, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
I want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Kerry, as well as Mr. Riley, for their work on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 1453, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of our key responsibilities in Congress is to manage taxpayer dollars wisely. I don't take that job lightly. I want to see DOE and all of our vital federal research agencies succeed in developing revolutionary next-generation technologies. At the same time, we need to monitor the progress of these projects well before their costs balloon to multi-billions of dollars and strain research budgets. H.R. 1453 allows us to do precisely that. It enhances transparency between DOE and Congress, giving both parties the necessary information and insights into the successes of federal demonstration projects to foster further achievements. Once again, I want to thank Mr. Kerry and his co-sponsor, Mr. Riley, Representative Riley, for leading this bill. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1453? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1701.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1701, a bill to require the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State to monitor efforts by the People's Republic of China to build or buy strategic foreign ports and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Izinga, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record exchanges of letters and other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
And I yield myself as much time as I may consume at this point.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of my bill, H.R. 1701, the Strategic Ports Reporting Act, introduced alongside Representatives Rob Whitman, Jake Auchincloss, and Johnny Olszewski, and co-sponsored by a bipartisan group of colleagues. This bill is simple, yet it is very necessary to expose the risks, the threats, and the vulnerabilities presented by overt Chinese control of global ports. Specifically, the Strategic Ports Reporting Act requires the State Department, in coordination with the Defense Department, to develop a global mapping of foreign and domestic ports of strategic importance to the United States due to their capacity of providing military, diplomatic, economic, or resource exploration superiority. In other words, the ports that are most important to the interests of the United States, both domestically and abroad. Additionally, this bill requires a study analyzing the activities and plans of the PRC to expand its web of control over global strategic ports while recognizing the U.S. national security and economic implications for such ownership. China's malign influence abroad continues to reach new corners of the global economy. Emerging from the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese President Xi Jinping's companion initiative, known as the Maritime Silk Road, ratifies a dominating stake in various countries by making critical investment in their strategic ports, some of which exist right here, even in the United States. Something that should resonate with all of our constituencies, as we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, is that vulnerabilities in supply chains have a significant real-world effect on our supply, on pricing, and access to essential goods. Moreover, the likelihood of the PRC leveraging its ports infrastructure to exert economic leverage in the future remains a significant challenge to the United States and our allies. While many of these investments in port projects are portrayed as commercial relationships, the PRC's global reach is cause for concern, given that many of these ports pose significant dual-use military risks. The fact remains that Chinese investments in strategic ports offer the CCP a launch pad to engage in a campaign of modern-day espionage. Now let's look at a couple of examples, Mr. Speaker. In the Western Hemisphere, the PRC opened its crown jewel, a gateway connecting South America to Asia in Chancay, Peru. This multi-billion-dollar deep-water megaport is owned by a Chinese state-owned entity, COSCO Shipping, C-O-S-C-O, COSCO Shipping, which has ties to the People's Liberation Army. Additionally, Chinese-tied entities manage ports at both ends of the Panama Canal. Here, the CCP coordinates private companies in pursuit of its communist agendas and wields a power to garner more political influence in a volatile region. I commend President Trump and his administration for its leadership and persistence to work with the Panamanians and BlackRock to change this reality. In the United States, 2 Chinese-owned entities, COSCO Shipping and China Merchant Group, a major participant and proponent in China BRI, control significant portions of the port of Long Beach, Seattle, Los Angeles, Houston, and Miami. The opportunity we create exposing our critical infrastructure to cybersecurity risks, foreign intelligence threats, and supply chain vulnerabilities cannot be understated, in my opinion. Outside of our hemisphere, China casts a wide geostrategic footprint of malign influence in other critical choke points, including a multitude of Chinese financed, developed, or managed ports across Africa. These ambitions provide access to critical minerals, naval launch pads, and consequential state-owned projections. Additionally, the deep-sea port in the city of Antalya on Georgia's Black Sea coast recently granted the tender for construction to a Chinese consortium sanctioned by the U.S. in 2020 for promoting militarization in the South China Sea. The strategic location of this port in the Middle Corridor, the trade route between China and Europe, would make this a crucial project for President Xi. Unfortunately, I believe many of these projects are just another example of emerging economies lured in by China's debt trap diplomacy. To combat these efforts, the heads of relevant U.S. government agencies must work collaboratively and creatively to ensure open access and security for strategic ports and offer alternatives to PRC investments in these ports. The Strategic Ports Reporting Act helps accomplish that goal. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1701, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
When President Xi started the Belt and Road Initiative at the Maritime Silk Road Initiative, Beijing embarked on a coordinated state mandate to finance, acquire, access, enhance, and build ports around the world. Today, the PRC is actively engaged in 115 port projects in at least 68 countries with more than $65 billion invested or promised. And at least 89 ports projects that have characteristics that could supply military applications. And with the largest Navy in the world, the PRC's ambitions are clear. It seeks global basin locations for an aspirational blue water Navy. Representative Huizinga's Strategic Ports Reporting Act will allow us to better track Beijing's attempt to grow its global maritime influence through its investments in foreign ports. The United States government needs ready access to all available information about the nature, extent, and intent of the PRC's involvement in port projects and maritime infrastructure around the world. And we need a strategy to drive diplomatic, development, and defense engagements to mitigate threats from the PRC's activities at critical ports. While several think tanks and research groups already map and report on PRC port activities, this bill reporting requirements can shed light on the impact of these ports on U.S. interests and national security. So it is critical that the United States government continue to monitor the nature, the extent, and the intent of the PRC's involvement in port projects and maritime infrastructure around the world and analyze the impact on U.S. strategic interest and on our partners and allies. And so I encourage all of my colleagues to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I will continue to reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes, it's my honor to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Representative Johnny Olszewski.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the ranking member and thank you to my colleague, Mr. Huizinga, for his leadership on this bipartisan and bicameral bill. I'm proud to join his efforts and co-lead on legislation that will help safeguard our ports and boost our economy. I've seen firsthand how critical our ports are to our national security, to our economic strength, and to the resilience of our supply chains. In my home state of Maryland, the Port of Baltimore is an anchor. It provides more than 15,000 direct jobs, supports another 140,000 connected jobs and services, and it's a critical gateway for commerce. It's one of the largest ports in the country for automobiles and ranks in the top 10 nationally for total cargo. The Port of Baltimore, like so many ports across the country, is an economic lifeline for our communities. Today, however, these lifelines face a growing challenge. Namely, China is aggressively expanding its influence over strategic ports around the world. China is building, buying, and controlling maritime infrastructure critical to U.S. interests. They now control or have stakes in critical ports across Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas, providing Beijing with unprecedented leverage over key maritime choke points and global trade routes. In the Western Hemisphere alone, Chinese companies have established ownership or operational control in ports spanning 7 countries, including major terminals here in the U.S. Last year, the House Select Committee on China and the House Homeland Security Committee conducted a joint investigation into the operation of ZPMC at U.S. ports. ZPMC is a Chinese state-owned company and the world's largest manufacturer of cranes. At the Port of Baltimore, the FBI discovered intelligence gathering equipment on board a vessel delivering ZPMC cranes to the Port of Baltimore. This allows China not only to advance its own economic interests, but also to potentially disrupt shipping access and gather intelligence on U.S. military movements. The Strategic Ports Reporting Act is a necessary and timely response to this threat. It's not just about commercial competition, it's about transparency, preparedness, and safeguarding our national security so we can continue to project power, protect our economy, and secure our supply chains. This is a bipartisan and common sense step to protect the American people. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and send a clear message. The U.S. will not cede control of our critical infrastructure to our adversaries. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I'm prepared to close. If the other side
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I too am prepared, have no other speakers, and prepared to close after the gentleman does. I do want to say, though, my colleague, Mr. Olszewski, I appreciate his involvement in this in a bipartisan manner. So with that, I will continue to reserve.
Gentleman from New York.
Yield myself as much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing. Mr. Speaker, the United States needs a strategy to effectively mitigate threats from the PRC's growing maritime influence through its investments in foreign ports. The report required under this bill will shine a light on the nature, the extent, and the intent of Beijing's involvement in port projects and maritime infrastructure around the world. And it will inform efforts by the United States government to analyze the impact on these ports on U.S. interests and our national security. And I hope that all of my colleagues will join me in support of this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I want to say thank you to my colleagues, Mr. Whitman on my side of the aisle, especially those on the other side of the aisle, Mr. Olszewski and Mr. Auchincloss, and my good friend, the ranking member, Mr. Meeks, for working through this. And Mr. Speaker, you know, peace through strength is a theme of the United States that we've had for a long time, and it is something that is imperative right now. And without stalwart diplomacy from the United States and its allies and economic partners, Communist China's global reach will only mature, sowing instability and insecurity, and frankly, as I talked about, some economic challenges abroad. So I appreciate the fact that the gentleman was talking a little bit about the private sector, and I welcome and appreciate their involvement in their attempts to do tracking and to analyze what is going on. But these other attempts at offering that strategy and the mapping of the critical assets lack up-to-date information oftentimes, and do not take into account the warfighter perspectives that President Trump's DOD brings, nor do they really use the lens of a U.S. national security priorities. That's why I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this legislation is so important. The Strategic Ports Reporting Act was deliberated and negotiated within the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and a bipartisan consensus on the text was reached. That's where we are today. So it remains imperative that the U.S. use all of its tools available to thwart malign Chinese influence and protect America's national security, our economic interests, and even our warfighters. That time is now, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1701? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, for what purpose?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the ground that a quorum is not present, and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this motion will be postponed. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President. A message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1263.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1263, a bill to require a strategy for bolstering engagement and cooperation between the United States, Australia, India, and Japan, and to seek to establish a Quad Inter-Parliamentary Working Group to facilitate closer cooperation on shared interests and values.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Izinga, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
And I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 1263, the Strengthening the Quad Act, introduced by my friend, the ranking member, Mr. Meeks, and chairwoman of the East Asia and Pacific Subcommittee, Congresswoman Young Kim. This legislation is a strategic, forward-thinking step that reinforces Congress's unwavering commitment to free, open, and a secure Indo-Pacific. At a time when the Chinese Communist Party is aggressively asserting its influence, militarizing the South China Sea, threatening Taiwan, coercing regional partners, and promoting authoritarianism, it is more critical than ever for the United States to deepen cooperation with like-minded democratic nations. The Quad, consisting of the United States, India, Japan, and Australia, is not just another diplomatic forum. It's a powerful strategic alliance built on unyielding values, respect for sovereignty, unwavering commitment to the rule of law, promotion of fair trade, and a relentless defense of democratic governance. This partnership is a force for stability and accountability in an increasingly turbulent world. The Strengthening the Quad Act takes this partnership to the next level. It empowers this relationship by ensuring regular, high-level engagement between the United States Congress and the legislatures of the Quad nations, fostering deeper collaboration and mutual understanding. We have seen the power of early engagement. On day one of President Trump's administration, Secretary Rubio convened the first-ever Quad foreign ministers meeting, demonstrating our dedication to confronting evolving geopolitical challenges alongside our democratic allies. By strengthening our partnership with the Quad, we are not just reinforcing allies in the Indo-Pacific, we are drawing a clear line in the sand, or maybe the oceans, Mr. Speaker. Democratic values and the rule of law will, and not might, shape the future of global power, not authoritarian coercion. As chairman of the South Central Asia's subcommittee, I support this legislation and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1263. I am the proud sponsor of this bill, the Strengthening the Quad Act, and I'm grateful to Representative Young Kim for introducing it with me, alongside Representative Berra, Heinzinger, and Kamlager-Dove. The Quad is a diplomatic dialogue that the United States has established with the governments of Japan, Australia, relaunched the Quad during his first term. President Biden elevated the Quad to the leaders level and operationalized it. And the second Trump administration has embraced the Quad as well. In fact, as Mr. Heinzinger has said, Secretary of State Marco Rubio's first official diplomatic meeting was with the Quad foreign ministers. The reason the Quad is so important today is very simple. Freedom and democracy in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world are currently under attack. According to Freedom House, the world has experienced 19 consecutive years of decline in global freedom. Given this global crisis, America must lead with our values and harness regional diplomacy to bring democracies together like never before, to foster cooperation and find solutions to complex challenges, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, which is one of the best tools we have to do. and we work with is, in fact, the Quad. The Quad allows us to work with 3 leading Indo-Pacific democracies to showcase the heft of open markets and open societies. In the face of the PRC's authoritarian model, we must demonstrate to the region that democracies can deliver and will deliver results. On this, Republicans and Democrats agree that the Quad is an integral for a free and open Pacific. But to ensure the Quad's success and longevity, we need to identify and pursue clear objectives and deepen political and institutional support in all 4 of the capitals. This is why H.R. 1263 calls on the State Department to develop a long-term strategy for the Quad. The strategy and report to Congress will allow successive administrations to set ambitious benchmarks and to partner with Congress to meet them. My bill also establishes a Quad intra-parliamentarian working group to facilitate engagement and cooperation among the legislatures of the 4 democracies. Interparliamentary engagement will expand diplomatic ties and strengthen oversight of our respective governments in order to enhance the Quad's effectiveness. It will also help to sustain political support and resources for the Quad in all 4 nations. It is simply a very important bill to further democracy in the Indo-Pacific. And so I encourage my colleagues to join in supporting this measure, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And at this time, I am very pleased to yield to the gentlelady from California, the chair of the Subcommittee on East Asia and the Pacific, my good friend, Mrs. Kim, for as much time as she may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Huizinga. I want to thank you for yielding, and I want to thank Ranking Member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ranking Member Mix, also for managing this on the House floor. And I rise in strong support of H.R. 1263, the Strengthening the Quad Act. As you heard, this is a Quad among the 4 nations, United States, Japan, India, and Australia. And this is a cornerstone of our strategy to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific and counter the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, and maintain stability and the U.S. interest, what the Department of Defense has deemed the priority theater. Against the backdrop of the CCP's militarization of the South China Sea, coercive economic practices, and territorial disputes, the Quad amplifies our 4 democracies' deterrence and economic, defense, and technological cooperation. The Strengthening the Quad Act takes our alliance to a step further by creating a comprehensive Quad strategy and establishing Quad Interparliamentary Working Group that reinforces America's commitment to our allies in the region. I've seen the benefit of interparliamentary working groups coming together, having worked on one of those in the past, and I think this is going to really bring all our interested parties together to really work on finding solutions to keep our strategic security partnership stronger. So now is the time to ramp up the Quad's collaboration on maritime security, cybersecurity, and efforts to counter disinformation to protect our allies and friends, especially in the Pacific Island nations. They are counting on us to show up. So I'm proud to co-lead this important legislation with Representative Mix, and I urge all my colleagues to support the Strengthening the Quad Act. With that, thank you, and I yield back.
And I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I have no other individuals to speak. I'm ready to close.
Gentleman from Michigan.
At this point, I have no other speakers as well, and I will continue to reserve while the gentleman closes.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bipartisan bill And I want to thank Representative Young Kim for her work on this bill, along with Mr. Berra, Mr. Heinzinger, and Ms. Kamlager-Dove. This bill passed the House in the last Congress and also the one before that. With authoritarianism on the rise and our Indo-Pacific allies and partners increasingly worried about the United States' commitment to their region, passing this bill now and getting it signed into law will reassure our allies that the United States will remain engaged at the highest of levels. This will help ensure that democracies in the region can continue to deliver and that we stay committed and find success in our collective endeavor to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. So I hope all of my colleagues will join me and support this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the ranking member, I appreciate your work on this, as well as the work of Chairwoman Kim, Mr. Barra, Ms. Kamlager-Dove. This is what can happen when we come together and have our common interests as a nation be projected out to our allies. And I've been involved in a number of other interparliamentary groups, IPGs, that really have allowed this body to build and foster relationships with others. And it is those critical relationships, not just at the administrative level, but also at that legislative level, that can work through some of the challenges that occur at times with our allies. So, Mr. Speaker, let's pass strengthening the Quad Act and send an unmistakable message. The United States stands firm with our allies, committed to peace through strength, prosperity through unity, and an unbreakable defense of democracy against authoritarian threats. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1263? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan
I would
seek
like to
recognition?
request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Ready? Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 217, Chip In for Veterans Act of 2025 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 70, H.R. 217, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to make permanent the pilot program authorized by the Communities Helping Invest Through Property and Improvements Needed for Veterans Act of 2016 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 217 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 217 as amended. This bill was introduced by my good friend and colleague, Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska. This bill would reauthorize the Chip In pilot program for another 5 years while expanding it nationwide. This pilot program has enabled public-private partnerships with VA to help fund the construction of projects for health care facilities. It is set to expire next year. In Omaha, Nebraska, VA and local partners used this authority to build an outpatient clinic 1 year ahead of schedule and $35 million under budget. They delivered to veterans in Nebraska a modern, state-of-the-art facility. With this bill, we would move VA to pursue even more public-private partnerships across the country to build new facilities in communities where veterans need them the most. Now, I want to thank my friend, Representative Bacon, for his work to bring Chip In program to the communities nationwide. I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 217 as amended. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 217, the Chip In Act, as amended. Now more than ever, VA needs flexibility and creative methods to address its infrastructure needs. This legislation extends through 2031 a pilot program that allows VA to accept donations of properties to meet its strategic capital investment project needs. It also expands the types of donations that VA can accept to include minor construction and non-reoccurring maintenance projects. VA's infrastructure needs are estimated to be over $150 billion, and those needs are growing every day. The average age of VA medical centers is over 60 years old, and many have retrofitting and maintenance needs that are not addressed under VA's existing budget requests. This pilot program presents an opportunity to find creative solutions where possible to address VA's infrastructure needs. Non-federal entities may donate either real property that already includes a constructed facility, or it can be used as the site of a new facility constructed by the donor. Or entities may donate a facility to be constructed on property VA already owns. Under the Chip In for Veterans Act, donors must independently donate the real property, improvements, goods, or services for the project in an amount acceptable to VA and at no additional cost to the government. So far, VA has received donations resulting in 2 medical facilities, an ambulatory care center in Omaha, Nebraska, which began seeing patients in 2020, and an inpatient medical center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is expected to open next year. Under the existing Chip In for Veteran Act authority, VA has only been able to accept donations that result in major construction projects, which are projects for which Congress has appropriated at least $20 million. H.R. 217, as amended, would expand the Chip In program to include minor construction and non-reoccurring maintenance projects. This would allow VA to accept donations of smaller outpatient clinics or to make improvements or build additions to existing facilities. Hopefully, with this expanded authority, VA will be able to attract even more donations. I do urge my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 217, the Chip In for Veterans Act of 2025 as amended. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now would like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman that's a sponsor of this bill, that has lived and seen what it has done, the gentleman from Nebraska, Representative Bacon.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for this opportunity. This is a win for the veterans from coast to coast, all 50 states, Puerto Rico, you name it. This is a win for veterans. I rise today in support of H.R. 217, Communities Helping Invest Through Property and Improvements Needed for Veterans Act, or the Chip In for Veterans Act. It's a bipartisan bill that strengthens and expands a proven program to deliver modern healthcare facilities for our nation's veterans more efficiently and at a lower cost to taxpayers. H.R. 217 leverages the success of the Chip In Act of 2016. We've extended it twice, and it's going to expire in 2026 if we don't get this bill done today. H.R. 217 as amended would reauthorize the pilot program and clarify the original intent of the program to allow the Department of Veterans Affairs to accept donations of real property from non-federal partners for the construction, improvement, or renovation of VA medical facilities. The bill changes current law to designate the eligible projects may include minor construction and non-recurring maintenance, in addition to the major construction projects. These revisions are intended to expand participation in the Chip In program and accelerate the delivery of modernized VA infrastructure for veterans across the country. I want to stress something that the chairman mentioned earlier in his comments. The first example of this use was completed in 2020. The VA programmed a total of $135 million to build a new ambulatory clinic in Omaha. $135 million. We built that facility at the cost of $80 million, at a higher specification and at better requirements, better across the board than what the VA would have done by itself, a $55 million savings. On top of that, we took $30 million in philanthropic money and offset that $85 million down to $55 million. In all, we saved the taxpayers $80 million on this one project. And we're looking to do it again with an inpatient facility where we think we can save $500 million to the VA and provide a better clinic for inpatient care for our vets. The trailblazing partnership delivered this outpatient facility, 157,000 square foot outpatient facility that serves hundreds of veterans each day using 8 primary care clinics, a first-of-a-kind women's health care clinic, and 1 specialty care clinic, a surgical suite with 5 operating rooms, including pre- and post-op space, radiology, and an on-site lab. The facility offers a satellite pharmacy with retail services. Now, this has become a national model for how non-federal investment can supplement VA's investment while reducing the cost of the VA or the federal government. The success of this project inspired a second facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as the ranking member said. The GAO has even recommended that the VA share lessons learned from the Omaha project to replicate its efficiency and innovation. I cannot emphasize enough the critical role of public-private partnerships in expanding access to high-quality health care for our nation's veterans. The Omaha facility is a testament to what is possible when the public and private sector come together. There are so many people in our country that have done well, and they want to invest in our veterans. So with that, I urge support for the Chip In Act. And with that, I yield back, and I thank the chairman and the ranking member.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
We have no more speakers, and I am ready to close. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 217, the Chip In Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all of our members to support H.R. 217 and support the legislation, and then I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 217 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
1147. Which one? Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1147, the Veterans Assembly Advisory Committee Act of 2025, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1147, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to establish the Veterans Advisory Committee on Equal Access and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1147 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1147, offered by my colleague, Representative David Valadao of California. The bill would direct the Department of Veterans Affairs to establish a Veterans Advisory Committee on Equal Access. The committee would advise the VA Secretary on how the department can improve access to VA benefit services, information, and facilities for individuals with disability. The committee would bring together veterans with disabilities, subject matter experts, VA employees, and representatives of veteran service organizations to make sure that the Secretary is getting the best advice from the right people. Speaker, it goes without saying that this is long overdue. Americans with disabilities are entitled to equal access to health care and benefits nationwide. That includes the VA. Congress made it clear through the Americans with Disabilities Act and other laws that this is the case. While VA has made progress in recent years, the promise of equal access for individuals with disabilities has not been fully achieved. We know these accessibility gaps still exist, and I want to thank the VSO community for their work to shine a spotlight on these issues. The goal of this legislation is to eliminate accessibility gaps, achieve universal access for veterans living with disabilities as they are entitled to by law. This is an important goal, and I believe that the advisory committee is well justified. I also share many of my colleagues' concerns about the growth of advisory committees in the federal government. There are simply too many. That's why this legislation would direct VA to eliminate or consolidate an inactive advisory committee. I want to close with thanking Representative Valadao for his commitment to resolving this issue. This bill passed the House unanimously last Congress, and there is no reason why it should not receive the same bipartisan support this Congress and be signed into law. I urge all my colleagues to support H.R. 1147 as amended, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1147, the Veterans Accessibility Advisory Committee Act of 2025 as amended. This bill establishes an advisory committee that brings disabled veterans' voices into the fold and provides a seat at the table with top decision makers at VA. Access is an issue I have sought to champion during my time in Congress, and particularly during my time with the Veterans Affairs Committee. Disabled veterans still face many barriers in accessing the care and services they have rightfully earned. Those barriers deserve the time and attention of a VA advisory committee so that experts can come together to improve how veterans with disabilities access their care and benefits. Advocates like the Blinded Veterans Association, Paralyzed Veterans of America, and Disabled American Veterans have been tireless voices in our communities, raising awareness of these issues. Establishing a Veterans Accessibility Advisory Committee will provide a direct line for these voices to be heard and for change to be made at VA so that all veterans can access their care and benefits with ease. In a time of drastic change at the department, While President Trump and Secretary Collins are at the helm, ensuring disabled veterans have a voice at the table is more important than ever. So I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Valdeo, who is the sponsor of this bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the Chairman for the time. I urge my colleagues to support the Veterans Accessibility Advisory Committee Act, which would make the Department of Veterans Affairs more accessible for our disabled veterans. Our veterans have sacrificed so much for our country, and we have a responsibility to make sure they receive the benefits and services they've earned. Sadly, too many disabled veterans face unnecessary obstacles in accessing care because of avoidable barriers at the VA. This bipartisan bill would create a permanent advisory committee within the VA made up of disabled veterans, experts, and advocates who understand these challenges firsthand. This committee will give our veterans a direct line to the Secretary of the VA, ensuring that their voices are heard and their needs are prioritized. This is a common-sense bipartisan step to improve oversight, enhance accessibility, and uphold our nation's commitment to the men and women who have sacrificed so much defending our freedoms. I want to thank Chairman Bost and his staff up at the Committee on the Veterans Affairs for their work on this important bill and to make the VA more accessible for our disabled veterans that it serves. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from
Mr. Speaker, we have no more speakers, and I am ready to close, and I will reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 1147, the Veterans Accessibility Advisory Committee Act of 2025, as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill, H.R. 1147, as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1286, the Simplify Forms for Veterans Claim Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 73, H.R. 1286, a bill to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to seek to enter into an agreement with the federally funded Research and Development Center for an assessment of forms that the Secretary sends to claimants for benefits under laws administered by the Secretary and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1286 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1286 as amended. The bill was introduced by my friend and colleague, Representative Brosnahan of Pennsylvania. This bill would require VA to contract with research entities to improve the forms that VA requires veterans and their families to fill out throughout the VA claims process. Incorrectly filling out these forms can force veterans to wait longer for a decision on their claim and cause veterans to receive wrongful denials of their claim. Veterans and their advocates have told Congress time and time again how disorganized and difficult these forms can be. As a veteran myself, it has been a challenge for me to complete these forms for my own disability claims. We must make VA standards forms more understandable for veterans so they can more easily access the earned VA benefits. This bill would do just that. Representative Brosnahan, common sense bill would ensure that Congress continues to push VA forward to better serve veterans, and I am proud to co-lead it. I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 1286 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 1286, simplifying forms for Veterans Claims Act as amended. Time and time again, we hear from veterans that they cannot make heads or tails out of some of the forms necessary to address veterans' benefits. Not only have we heard it from veterans, but we've also heard it from accredited experts who assist in preparing disability claims. This must be corrected. We cannot have veterans leaving earned benefits on the table because they put a piece of information on a line below where it should have been because the form was hard to understand. It's not a stretch to think of a veteran attempting to file for a claim in their later years when their eyes don't see as well, or they can't remember all the minute details from service long ago. That can be a frustrating experience. So H.R. 1286 proposes that VA enter into an agreement with a federally funded research and development center to assess the forms VA is currently using. Sometimes when you are so close to a problem, it's hard to see what the core of the issue is. This bill will allow fresh eyes to review and study the forms VA uses in order to find areas for improvement. Now, these could be small fixes that lead to positive improvement in a veteran's life. As we work to better the veteran's experience, we should be looking at making large programs better. We should be looking at building new state-of-the-art facilities, technology that integrates seamlessly between agencies, doctors, and departments. We should be making big changes to make big impacts, but we should also commit to small changes that can also improve the veteran experience. And that's what this bill does do. It starts to move in the direction of making forms easier for our veterans to review, complete, and ultimately get their earned benefits. So I support this bill and the agreement to enter into a study to see where there's room for improvement as veterans seek better access to their earned benefits. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill and to continue to advocate for a better veteran experience. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to now yield 3 minutes to the sponsor of this bill, the representative from Pennsylvania's 8th District, Representative Brosnahan.
Thank you, Chairman Bosk. I'm honored today to speak on H.R. 1286, the Simplifying Forms for Veterans Claims Act. I'm proud to lead this bipartisan bill with the support of Chairman Bosk and the Veterans Affairs Committee. When our veterans return home from serving our country, they are often tasked with filling out dozens of pages of paperwork just to receive the benefits they rightfully earned. These forms are often confusing, difficult to navigate, and duplicative. It is crucial that our veterans and survivors understand how to fill out each form completely and accurately, because failure to do so can result in delays in processing their claim, delays in receiving a decision on their claim, or even a denial of their claim. Veterans and survivors are often forced to rely on veteran service organizations, VSOs, to assist them with completing forms because these VA standard forms, including their attached instructions, can be disorganized and confusing to navigate. These VSOs have highlighted the need to improve VA standard forms so that they are more straightforward and user-friendly. That's why I introduced the Simplifying Forms for Veterans Claims Act. It would require VA to contract with a nonpartisan, federally funded research entity to conduct a study on and provide recommendations for revising VA forms to be more understandable for veterans and their survivors. Our military members dedicated their lives to serving our nation. The last thing they need when they come home are mountains of daunting paperwork. Veterans and their families have best chance of accessing their earned VA benefits and should not be subjected to a VA claims process that is more difficult and stressful than necessary. Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District is home to 40,000 veterans. I am proud to spearhead this legislation for each and every one of them and their families. I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 1286 because we owe our veterans a system that works efficiently and effectively on their behalf. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and I'm ready to close. I have no more. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers. Prepare to close.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 1286, Simplifying Forms for Veterans Claims Act as amended. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 1286 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, for what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
We request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this voice vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1815 as amended, the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1815, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to authorize the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to take certain actions in the case of a default on a home loan guaranteed by the Secretary and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1815 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1815 as amended, offered by my friend and colleague, Representative Van Orton from Wisconsin. For the last year, House Republicans have raised concerns about the Biden administration's creation of a VA service purchase program, or the VASP program. Speaker, this Biden program was estimated to cost over $15 billion in tax dollars. It also put the VA home loan program at risk for today and tomorrow's veterans. It was a bad program, and the Trump administration was right to stop it. However, I recognize that sometimes veterans and their families fall on hard times, and veterans need a safety net. Mr. Van Orton's bill, H.R. 1815, as amended, is fiscally responsible solution to enhance the VA home loan program and give veterans the assistance they might need if they are in home loan debt. The bill is the result of over a year of discussions between VSOs, veterans, the lenders, and members of the properly established a partial claim program for veteran homeowners should they need it. The bill is the only fiscal responsible solution to a problem that Mr. Van Orton and I have been sounding the alarm for over a year. Instead of VA running rampant and creating a program without Congress with an intent, established a partial claim program where elected officials have made changes to improve a government program is how the democracy should work. This bill would also require VA to implement a strategic plan to ensure that veterans remain competitive in their home loan process. Finally, this bill includes the proper funding for the grant and per diem provisions we passed in the Dole Act last year to fix the Biden administration's mistake. Under my leadership, my committee will continue to honor its commitment to all veterans, including ensuring proper funding is provided to the GPD providers working to lift veterans out of homelessness. And I thank everyone who has come together to get this. I want to thank everybody that's come together to get this bill to this place. I want to give a special thanks to the Mortgage Bankers Association, Rocket Mortgage, National Association of Realtors, National Association of Mortgage Brokers for supporting this legislation and helping us get it to the finish line on behalf of our veterans and their family. Now, I appreciate my Democrat colleagues for their bipartisan support of this legislation. With their support, I hope we can get a good bill passed to the Senate quickly and then to the President's desk very soon. I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 1815 as amended, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1815, the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act as amended. But we are unfortunately here to solve a crisis of the Trump administration's own making. Because of the unilateral actions of President Trump and Secretary Collins, over 80,000 veterans, service members, and their families are now facing foreclosures on their homes. Let's review how we got here. Our nation faced an unprecedented crisis with COVID-19. That required action from VA to prevent the loss of hundreds of thousands of homes when our economy ground to a halt. President Biden, with the support of Congress, took action. First, the president used existing authorities to pause foreclosures. Then, with the authorities granted by the National Disaster Declaration, VA was able to implement a partial claims program very similar to this very legislation we're considering today, saving tens of thousands of veterans from losing their homes. Republicans, including Chairman Bost, urged President Biden to end the U.S. national emergency for COVID-19, which occurred on April 11th, 2023. Now, this resulted in VA losing authorities to carry out a partial claims program, again, not unlike the legislation we're considering now. Now, at that moment, action was still critically needed, or veterans would have lost their homes. The VA could no longer offer a partial claims program because, of course, the national emergency was ended. So President Biden instituted a second foreclosure moratorium to give VA more time to offer a solution. So President Biden and Secretary Dennis McDonough began to work in 2023 and launched the Veterans Affairs Servicing Purchase Program, or VASP, on May 31st, 2024. During that year, most lenders cooperated and very few veteran foreclosures occurred. This new program, VASP, used explicit existing authorities granted by Congress to offer veteran homeowners a last resort before losing their home. However, last month, Secretary Collins, President Trump, and Elon Musk's DOGE abruptly ended the VASP program, giving veterans no notice that a critical lifeline for borrowers was being taken away. This decision was pushed for and celebrated by Chairman Bost and Subcommittee Chairman Van Orden. If you listen to them, they will argue that the program meant that VA would incur too much risk, or that VA was not properly prepared to handle holding the loans of these veterans. Just so we're all clear, VA already holds the risks for loans in the home loan program. The program is called the Loan Guarantee Program. VA is guaranteeing that lenders are made whole if a veteran is foreclosed on. The lenders collect the interest profit from the loan, and if a foreclosure happens, the lenders, are paid first. Now let me read from VA's own website, and I quote, "A VA home loan guarantee means that a purchaser obtains a loan through a private lender, such as a bank, credit union, or mortgage company. VA then works with the lender to guarantee the loan. If the homeowner defaults on the loan, VA will pay the debt to the lender," end quote. Second, the claim that VA doesn't know how to manage property or hold loans is just plain wrong. VA has an extensive property management portfolio. VA testified before our committee earlier this year on its ability to hold the loans. VA already has enhanced use leases on nearly 40 of its campuses, meaning VA is acting as a landlord that is managing property being used by lessees. Further, President Trump recently announced his intentions to own a massive housing property at the West LA campus. I look forward to working with the administration to make this happen, and this absolutely is evidence of VA's ability to manage land and properties. Now, today, I and members of Congress continue to field calls from veterans who learned from a press release that they are likely to lose their home. These are veterans who saw the Secretary's April 25th notice that the program was ending. These very same veterans who tried to apply for the program and who found out that the program had already closed. The May 1st date was deceptive. The May 1st closing date was deceptive. In reality, these veterans would have had to have submitted their paperwork much earlier in April. This is outrageous and cruel. In the chairman state of Illinois, over 2,000 borrowers face foreclosure. In the bill's sponsor state of Wisconsin, and the bill's sponsor state of Wisconsin, over 600 borrowers face foreclosure. In my state of California, over 4,000 borrowers face foreclosure. I could go on, but these borrowers had options to avoid foreclosure, but these options are now severely limited. Many of these veterans are now afraid of speaking out against the VA in fear of retribution. They are disabled veterans, Vietnam War era veterans, Gulf War veterans, active duty military members. These veterans and these soldiers had our backs. Where is the Trump-Collins VA? Unnecessarily pushing them into risk of foreclosure. As mortgage rates in the open market remain high compared to recent years, and with the closure of the VASP program, the only options available to these borrowers are either selling their home or being foreclosed upon. As VASP was the program of last resort, ending VASP has accelerated the risk to these borrowers. Now that brings us to the legislation we're considering today. This legislation attempts to offer a lifeline to those the Trump administration has unnecessarily put at risk. It's not a perfect or complete fix, and it is likely to be too late for many of the 80,000 who are wondering today if they will still have a home in a month, but it is necessary legislation that I urge the department to implement quickly. In the minority views filed for this legislation, I continue to urge the Secretary to reinstate some kind of assistance for veteran borrowers until this legislation is signed into law and implemented. That will take some time. Every veteran who loses their home will have no one to blame but President Trump and Secretary Collins. Now, it's not too late for Secretary Collins to act, and I hope veterans, VSOs, and housing groups continue to call on him to do so. I also call on my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join those efforts instead of celebrating the end of VASP. So I plan to support H.R. 1815 as amended, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting it. But this legislation should be expanding existing options for veterans to make foreclosure extremely rare and only in the most extreme cases. Instead, this is a Band-Aid that likely will arrive too late for many. Mr. Speaker, I do urge all members to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I appreciate the other side of the aisle highlighting the problem with veterans are facing today. Thank goodness we're working on a solution right here with 1815, and we're going to be voting on it today. You know, VA's decision to phase out the Veterans Affairs Service Purchase Program, or VASP program, was an important step by Trump administration. This decision added billions of dollars to VA budget without any assurance to the taxpayers that this was a good decision. Just last week, my office received information that on top of paying $6.3 billion to purchase VA loans, VA also had spent an additional $1.5 billion just to support their financing. The average amount of that a veteran had to pay back of their mortgage was actually less than $25,000. Instead of solving the problem, VA chose to purchase the entire loan, which on an average is $321,000. In no way does that make sense to solve a $25,000 problem with a $320,000 solution. Only in government would you do that. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that this bill would have saved money by keeping the veterans out of foreclosure, this bill. They estimate that earlier this Congress, the continuing of VASP would cost the taxpayers over $500,000 the next decade, next decade. That is why, under my leadership, House Republicans have sounded the alarm on the Biden administration program and the risk it could bring to VA home loans. I'm urging still the support of H.R. 1815 because that's sensible. And so sensible, that's why myself and Representative Van Orton have been working to try to cure this problem. And with that, I would like to yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orton.
Wisconsin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of my bill, H.R. 1815, the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act. This legislation establishes a permanent partial claims program within the VA Home Loan Program, bringing VA in line with all of the other federal agencies that lend monies for homes. As a chairman of the House Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, I'm responsible for the two most successful programs the history of the United States government has ever administered, the GI Home Loan Program and the GI VA Home Loan Guarantee. And it is my responsibility to make sure that every active duty service member, every veteran, and every American that chooses to join the military in the future has the opportunity to use this program to borrow money to fulfill the American dream, which is home ownership. But as stated previously, when an unelected series of bureaucrats invented a program that has not existed since someone first lent someone seashells to buy a cave, they greatly endangered that. And I am incredibly proud of the Trump administration for standing up to stop this. As Chairman Bost noted, there was a $25,000 problem and the Veterans Affairs Administration threw a $320,000 wrench at it. And that had the potential to collapse this program over time. And I will not allow that on my watch. So I want to thank the chairman. I want to thank Secretary Collins. I want to thank President Donald J. Trump for helping ensure that every American that has served, is serving, and will serve the United States of America to protect our freedoms has the ability to fulfill the American dream, which is home ownership. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
We have no more speakers, and I'm ready to close, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I will just point out that the gentleman from Illinois, the chairman, is making a mountain out of nothing. The greater risk either way to the government, the home loan program, the VA is on the hook for these loans, whether they hold them or whether lenders hold the note. What we're talking about here is veterans unnecessarily, 80,000 veterans with highly distressed loans being unnecessarily put at risk. And the Biden administration did what it could, given changing circumstances, from an expiring emergency authorities to having to put a second pause on any foreclosures on these veterans, to finding a solution in VASP. I am supportive of a replacement to VASP, but it is inexplicable why the Secretary would suddenly, without notice, end the program, put veterans very much right at this very moment who would have liked to have applied for VASP before it had been terminated, but as we speak, there is no solution. And regardless of how quickly we move in this chamber or in the Senate, it is going to take time to stand up this replacement program in time. Meanwhile, we will see veterans lose their homes, all for a very flimsy reason. And so anyway, I reserve the balance of, I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Illinois is prepared to close.
I am prepared to close, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Well, again, I support this legislation, but context is important. This legislation is now critically important because of recent actions by this administration. This legislation also includes funding funding for the homelessness programs passed as part of the Elizabeth Dole Act last Congress. The Trump-Collins VA continued to drag their feet on implementation of sections of the Dole Act that increase our ability to get homeless veterans housed and off the streets. Now, I'd like to address Chairman Boss' remarks that the reason portions of the Dole Act were not implemented, and this is regarding the grant and per diem section for the homeless, were due to the Biden administration's failure. This is not true. The Biden administration clearly articulated the policy needed in the Dole Act. The chairman failed to include those in the bill before passage last Congress. Now, the Trump veteran housing crisis first cuts off foreclosure assistance, driving veterans into homelessness, then blocks aid to homelessness providers. My colleagues want to claim today that we are fixing the Trump veteran housing crisis, but if they are serious, they need to join our calls for immediate action by Secretary Collins. First, we need to implement the Dole Act, including the section on augmentations to the grant and per diem program for the homeless, to getting homeless off the streets. We need to stop the firing of veterans working at VA. We need to halt veteran foreclosures until, at the very least, the legislation we are considering today has been implemented. And we need to bring back VASP to offer borrowers more avenues to keep their homes. Otherwise, President Trump may see the number of homeless veterans double in a single year. So I will close by saying again that I support H.R. 1815, the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act as amended, but action is truly needed before it is too late. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And only in response do I think it's necessary that we need to say something that needs to be cleared up that was spoken from the other side of the aisle. One is that the Veterans Home Loan Program does not assume the entire loss of the debt into the existing program. It did during VASP, but what it did is, because it is a loan guarantee, it was 25%. 25%. I think that needs to be clear for the record. But this bill is the cure, I believe, for the problems that we're having right now. At least gives a off step to secure these loans, to make sure that as few as possible do face foreclosure. It is a good bill. It's a good bill that's going to receive support from both sides of the aisle. The argument before was that's just it. It's an argument before. Now, I would just encourage all of my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The time for debate is ended. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1815 as amended? Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1823, the VA Budget Shortfall Accountability Act as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 74, H.R. 1823, a bill to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and the Comptroller General of the United States to report on certain funding shortfalls in the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1823 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1823 as amended. This bill was introduced by my friend and colleague, Representative Jack Berkman. The bill will create good government accounting and reporting practices in handling of VA's multi-billion-dollar budget. General Berkman introduced this bill in response to a disastrous miscalculation during the Biden administration, which led to a fake budget shortfall. Last July, VA informed Congress about a potential $15 billion shortfall. VA said it needed the money for unprecedented increases in benefit claims and health care services. This notice came after the Biden administration had already submitted its VA budget request. Speaker, it should go without saying that VA should have known its financial situation much earlier than the time they told us about the shortfall that ended up never existing. Now, according to VA Office of Inspector General, the miscalculations stem from a lack of oversight, accuracy, and communication. It's time to change that. If there's anything that we have learned, it is that we need our eyes on the VA budget and their reviews. And I'm proud to support General Berkman's bill to do exactly that. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1823 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak in hesitant support of H.R. 1823, the VA Budget Shortfall Accountability Act of 2025, as amended. This bill requires that the U.S. Government Accountability Office to conduct a review of the circumstances surrounding the budget shortfalls at the Veterans Benefit Administration in fiscal year 2024 and at the Veterans Health Administration in fiscal year 2025. Upon completion, GAO will submit the report to VA, which must transmit it to the House and Senate Veterans Affairs and Appropriations Committees. GAO is then required to complete 5 subsequent annual reviews of VHA's and VBA's budget execution for the preceding fiscal year. Now, I am concerned that this legislation is duplicative of reports that have already been published by VA's Office of Inspector General and of work GAO is currently conducting that was initiated under the Comptroller General's authority. Now, it is especially concerning that we are considering H.R. 1823 today, given the context of the letter Chairman Bost recently sent to the Department of Justice urging the Attorney General to investigate 3 former Biden administration officials for criminal wrongdoing in handling last year's budget shortfall. This bill should be viewed as political retaliation. It is not serious oversight. Give me a break. The reports recently issued by OIG have already determined that VA's existing accounting and budget technological infrastructure is a primary cause of the shortcomings in VA's monitoring of budget execution that led to the VBA and VHA shortfalls in fiscal years 2024 and 2025, respectively. This bill does nothing to address that and other underlying causes, and instead seems to be designed to reopen investigation of previous errors. GAO's resources could be put to better use on more meaningful oversight of VA's budget formulation and execution process to include the role of the Office of Management and Budget in determining VA's annual budget requests. Now, this legislation will not accomplish that. While I find the intent of the bill to be retaliatory in nature in terms of the time it will waste looking back on the Biden administration budget, I do agree with my majority colleagues that the Trump administration budget formulation and execution process warrants scrutiny. So, for that reason, I'm pleased that the majority added a provision to the bill before markup that requires GAO to review VA's budget each year of the Trump administration. Secretary Collins has already broken the law by redirecting funds without congressional approval, and I worry that trend will continue over the next 4 years. So I hope my colleagues will join me in rigorous oversight of the Trump administration's approach to VA's budget. I will not stand in the way of this bill's passage today. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to yield as much time as he may consume to General Berkman, who's the chief sponsor of this legislation.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my thanks to the chairman and the ranking member for supporting this legislation. I rise today in strong support of my legislation, the VA Budget Shortfall Accountability Act, a bill that puts veterans first by ensuring the systems meant to serve them are working as intended. Last July, the VA came to Congress with a dire warning. The agency was facing major funding shortfalls, nearly $3 billion for veterans benefits and additional $12 billion for health care. The message was urgent. Without immediate action, benefits could be delayed for millions of veterans. So Congress acted quickly and responsibly to approve supplemental funding, because when it comes to our veterans and their families, there can be no margin for error. Their peace of mind, their financial security, and their access to care are not negotiable. But just weeks later, we learned that there were, in fact, no shortfalls. Revised financial estimates from the VA showed billions of dollars left unspent. So while the shortfall didn't actually exist, the panic, confusion, and sleepless nights for the veterans wondering whether they would receive care was very real, and it was avoidable. Mr. Speaker, the goal of H.R. 1823 is not to assign blame, it's to strengthen trust. Our veterans should never have to worry that an accounting error might prevent them from receiving their earned care and benefits. This bill simply ensures that the Comptroller General will audit the VA's budgeting and accounting systems, identify where things went wrong, and help make sure it never happens again. Let's be clear. The VA serves millions of veterans with dedication and compassion every day. But we can always do better, and our veterans deserve nothing less. They've earned the peace of mind that comes from knowing their government is not only committed to them, but equipped to serve them reliably. The VA Budget Shortfall Accountability Act is about reinforcing that commitment. This is not a partisan issue. It's about making sure we get it right for those who have served our nation every time. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in supporting this bill, which will help ensure that our veterans never have to question whether their benefits and care will be there when they need them. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back to the gentleman from Illinois.
We have no more speakers, and I'm ready to close, and I reserve.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers and prepare to close.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to share my position on this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Being no further debate, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1823 as amended? Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2201, the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 71, H.R. 2201, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to improve claims made under laws administered by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs regarding military sexual trauma and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 2201 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in support of H.R. 2201 as amended. This bill was introduced by my friend and colleague, Representative Young Kim. This bill would require that VA claims processors and contracted disability compensation examiners undergo annual sensitivity training to prevent re-traumatizing survivors of military sexual trauma who are pursuing claims for VA benefits. The bill would also ensure that VA employees receive better training and obtain all relevant military service records so veterans can receive more accurate decisions on their military sexual trauma claims. Because military sexual trauma often goes unreported, a veteran's military service records rarely prove that they experienced an MST. This bill would ensure the VA claims processors review and understand the types of evidence that can prove an MST claim. Further, veterans relive what they suffered through during service when they file a claim based on military sexual trauma. We must ensure that every interaction VA has with them is trauma-informed. Representative Kim's bill would decrease the risk of re-traumatizing veterans who have endured MST. Her bill would also streamline the MST claims process for them so that these veterans can more easily access their disability benefits. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2201 as amended, and with that I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2201, the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act as amended. I think we can all agree that no one should ever be subject to sexual violence while serving in the military. It is truly a tragedy that it happens at all, but sadly it does. And unfortunately, it occurs to many men and women in our military ranks at a rate likely greater than that of the general public. That means among some of the best people our country has, there are far too many who have been violated in the most personal of ways. Far too often, sexual assault in the military is perpetrated by those in positions of power. And far too often, these assaults are swept under the rug by the chain of command with the poor excuse that this is being done to avoid disrupting unit cohesion. This means that the victims of sexual assault are left to serve with and under their assailants, watching them go unpunished for their crimes. This is a double indignity that no one should ever have to suffer. Sexual trauma is unlike any other trauma. It has the ability to separate someone from their own body. It can make someone feel like they are a stranger in that body, and it can make them feel unsafe in their own skin. The effects of this trauma are heartbreaking, and it can be lasting. Asking victims of sexual violence to speak about it or provide physical evidence relating to it can be re-traumatizing. Currently, the Department of Veterans Affairs requires that personnel managing claims of this type receive training on the subject every 5 years. That seems like a long time between training for such a sensitive subject and a unique type of concern, especially as the study and treatment of these issues evolves rapidly and new best practices are developed and implemented. And when it comes to the treatment of military sexual trauma compensation claims, I think it's worth revisiting training annually to ensure that we are giving these veterans proper care and treatment. H.R. 2201 is an effort to add a little more care and compassion to the process of disability claims of this nature. We routinely advocate for the veteran and their well-being in our community, in our committee, and this bill does just that. By mandating that providers have more frequent and updated training, we can ensure better outcomes for the veteran. It is something we must keep pushing for. Every day we must work to build a better veterans experience, and providing training more frequently can help us accomplish that goal. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 2201 and to continue to press for better care for veterans. And to the victims of sexual assault out there who may be listening right now, please know that you are seen and heard. I will continue to push for accountability for those who perpetrated that assault. And I will push even harder to ensure you get the compassionate care that you have earned and deserve. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to yield as much time as she may consume to the gentlewoman from California and chief sponsor of this bill, Representative Kim.
The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Bost. Thank you for yielding. I rise in strong support of my bill, H.R. 2201, the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 50 men experienced military sexual trauma, or MST, as a service member. And as many of my colleagues have already stated, a claim based on MST can be difficult to prove because MST often goes unreported during military service. Furthermore, evidence indicating that MST occurred is difficult to evaluate, and VA claims processors and examiners do not have sufficient training to recognize indirect evidence of MST. They are also not required to undergo annual sensitivity training to reduce the risk of re-traumatizing survivors of MST. Further, the law requires VA to help veterans filing disability benefits claims based on MST gather evidence for their claims. However, VA does not always obtain a veteran's complete service personnel and medical records, which can provide crucial evidence to prove an MST claim. So this bipartisan bill works to improve the MST claim process by requiring VA employees working on these cases to complete annual training to better identify evidence and to ensure that veterans are not re-traumatized during the examination process. Additionally, the VA would be required to automatically obtain all service personnel and medical records for veterans filing an MST claim to ensure their cases are processed in an accurate and timely manner. Streamlining the MST claim process and improving VA training will ensure veterans who endured MST can more easily access their earned benefits and ensure they are treated with compassion during the claims process. I want to thank Representative Budzinski, Don Bacon, and Chrissy Houlihan for their collaboration on this common sense, bipartisan measure that provides survivors of MST with the support and protection they deserve. So I urge my colleagues to support the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act. Thank you, and I yield back.
The lady from California yields back to the gentleman from Illinois.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Technology Modernization, Representative Budzinski from Illinois.
The lady from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you very much. Just a few weeks ago, I was speaking in committee to celebrate the bipartisanship of this important legislation and the urgent need to pass it out of the House. And today, we are one step closer to making it a reality. I want to first thank Representative Young Kim for her leadership and collaboration on this bill, and I want to thank our veterans for their service and bravery. This bill is needed for so many of those veterans who have endured sexual trauma while in service. When these veterans go to file military sexual trauma claims, navigating the VA system should never add to the pain they have already endured. That's why I introduced this bipartisan legislation to ensure the VA's claims process supports rather than re-traumatizes survivors of MST. Right now, contracted disability compensation examiners are only required to complete outdated online sensitivity training before handling these deeply sensitive claims. This insufficient preparation can make the claims process re-traumatizing for those who have already suffered. MST affects veterans of all genders. While it is more common among women, many male veterans are also impacted. We must ensure that all our survivors are treated with dignity and care. The Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act would modernize and strengthen the training required for VA staff and contractors who work on MST claims and help cut through the red tape too often delays justice and support. I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields back to the gentleman from Illinois.
I reserve.
California, and the gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no more speakers, and I'm ready to close.
Gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 2201, the Improving VA Training for Military Sexual Trauma Claims Act of 2025 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois yields. The time for debate having ended. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2201 as amended? Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1364, the Assist Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 69, H.R. 1364, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to provide clarification regarding the inclusion of medically necessary automobile adaptations and Department of Veterans Affairs definition of medical services.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1364 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 1364 as amended, and the bill was introduced by my friend and fellow veteran, Representative Barrett from Michigan. H.R. 1364 as amended would allow eligible disabled veterans to receive adaptive automobile equipment that they may need to safely operate their vehicles. Right now, there are too many restrictions on eligible items veterans could use under this program. Mr. Barrett's bill would close that loophole and give disabled veterans the flexibility that they need to live independent lives. Additionally, the bill would include adaptations for drivers, passengers' use to get veterans where they need to be. This Congress, the Trump administration, has committed to making VA work for the veterans again. This bill would cut the bureaucracy nonsense from the last administration and do just that. I thank the VFW and the WWP and PVA for supporting this bill. I also want to thank Representative Barrett for introducing this bill and for the work on behalf of the disabled veterans across the country. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1364 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1364, the Automotive Support Services to Improve Safe Transportation or Assist Act of 2025 as amended. For disabled veterans, attending a medical appointment is often not a routine drive, but rather can be a logistical and physical challenge. And that is why Representative Levin and Representative Fletcher led the passage of the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022 into law. Now, this law allowed veterans to upgrade their vehicles every 10 years and authorized the Department of Veterans Affairs to offer mobility improvements to vehicles for the purposes of attending medical appointments. However, now that this landmark law has been implemented, oversight has led to the identification of some gaps in the types of mobility services currently authorized by law. Now, this is where the Assist Act comes in. This legislation, led by Representative Barrett and co-led by Representative Maggie Goodlander, Representative Susie Lee, Representative Jason Crow, and Representative Eugene Vindman, expands the types of equipment and services that VA is authorized to provide. Now, these are benefits and services these veterans have earned, and it is our duty in Congress to ensure veterans don't have to worry about how they will access the care they have earned through their service to our nation. I urge all members to support this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield to the chief sponsor of this bill, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Barrett, as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member. I appreciate your support of my bill, H.R. 1364, the Assist Act. During my 22 years in the United States Army, I was fortunate to return home without the need for assistive devices, but for too many who serve or have served, that isn't the case. Too many are returning home with wounds that can't be healed, leaving them permanently disabled and in need of assistive technology. Not only does service-connected disability negatively impact a veteran's quality of life, but it can cause barriers as they attempt to transition back to civilian life. My bipartisan bill ensures that disabled veterans, with help from the Department of Veteran Affairs, are empowered to make the vehicle modifications they need to safely and efficiently travel. Right now, the VA is restricted to funding only a limited number of adaptive equipment devices, such as wheelchair tie-downs, van lifts, and raised roofs. This unfortunately and unintentionally limits, and in many cases prevents altogether, some veterans from being able to make necessary modifications to their vehicles, such as ramp and kneeling systems, mobility device lifts, ingress and egress accessibility modifications. The Assist Act fixes this gap in assistance and would make sure that disabled veterans can continue traveling safely and freely when they return home. Specifically, this will give the VA greater flexibility to offer financial assistance for a wider range of medically necessary vehicle adaptations. This is a common sense solution that removes bureaucratic red tape and gives veterans the resources they deserve to live a life fully after they serve. The bottom line is that our veterans put their bodies on the line for the very freedoms that we cherish and often take for granted. In return, they deserve to be taken care of when they take off the uniform. By passing this bill today, we can ensure that no veteran is denied essential mobility assistance because of an outdated government list that leaves many things left off. I'd specifically like to thank my colleague, Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander, for leading this effort with me, and I look forward to working with Senator Tuberville to get this through the Senate and onto the President's desk for signature. It's time to give America's heroes the resources they need to live their lives to their fullest, and I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this bill. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back to the gentleman from Illinois.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend and co-sponsor of H.R. 1364. She currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the Small Business Committee. The gentlewoman from the state of New Hampshire, Representative Goodlander.
The gentlelady from New Hampshire is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Ranking Member Takano. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your work today on this bill and on the other bills that I hope will soon pass the House of Representatives. I rise today in support of a bipartisan bill that I'm very proud to be leading with my colleague and friend, Congressman Barrett. It does two important things that I came to Congress to do. Number one, it cuts some senseless red tape and updates outdated laws so that our government can work better for hardworking people. And it also, in equal measure, delivers on what I believe is a sacred obligation that we owe to the women and men who serve our country in uniform, especially those who sustain life-changing injuries during their service to our country. Our bipartisan bill called the Assist Act makes common sense changes that's going to really cut red tape that's limiting and, as Congressman Barrett said, preventing far too many disabled veterans in our country from accessing the medically necessary and basic equipment that they need to travel safely and freely. The freedom to travel is just one of the many freedoms, basic freedoms, that our veterans fought for while they served our country in uniform, and so we can and must do better. My home state of New Hampshire is home to tens of thousands of veterans who are living with service-connected disabilities, including a man I'm very proud to represent, Gary Gordon from Concord, New Hampshire. He's a Vietnam veteran, a fellow Navy veteran, who today relies on a power chair to live his life. Gary Gordon has truly dedicated his life to our country in uniform as an EMT, as a mental health worker at our state hospital for more than 2 decades, and he reached out to our office for help navigating the process of getting the basic adaptive equipment that he needs to live his life and to get his power chair into his car. It's a brand new power chair, but under current law, the VA is limited in providing the basic type of equipment that Gary Gordon needs to get his power chair into his vehicle. This is a problem that this Congress can and must solve, and we can do that by passing the Assist Act. It really is a common sense, straightforward bill that's going to make it easier and possible for the VA to cover the basic equipment that our veterans need to live their lives. It's going to help us meet the moment and provide the best possible care that our veterans deserve. So as we approach Memorial Day, I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to come together and to support this common sense bipartisan legislation that's really going to be life-changing for veterans all across our country. So with that, I thank you and yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady yields back to the gentleman from Illinois.
Reserve.
And the gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no more speakers. I'm ready to close, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I'm prepared to close, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support H.R. 1364, the Assist Act of 2025 as amended, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois yields. The time for debate has ended. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1364 as amended? Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1578, the Veterans Claims Education Act of 2025 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 75, H.R. 1578, a bill to amend Title 38 United States Code to promote assistance from persons recognized by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for individuals who file certain claims under laws administered by the Secretary.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Bost, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 1578 as amended.
Without objection.
Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 1578 as amended, introduced by my colleague, Representative Peters from California. This bill would ensure veterans know about the availability of accredited representatives, including those who help with filing initial VA benefits claims at no cost. It would also give veterans the information and online resources they need to find an accredited representative who is right for them and to report any unaccredited bad actors who wrongfully charge a fee for their services. This bill would also require VA to review its accreditation process and give Congress recommendations for improvement. Veterans and their families deserve all the information they need to decide who will provide the best assistance with their claim. This bill ensures just that. I thank Representative Peters for his work on this bill, and I urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 1578 as amended, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of H.R. 1578, the Veterans Claims Education Act of 2025, as amended. Obtaining veterans benefits can be confusing. The process can be cumbersome. And because of the complexity and scope of VA and its programs, some veterans take to an internet search to figure out how to get their claims approved. It seems certain actors have figured out that in the confusion of the process, they can make a profit, or with claims specifically, hundreds of millions of dollars in profits. Oftentimes, when veterans log on and search how to get their claims submitted, they're greeted by clickbait ads for claim sharks. These are the people who charge exorbitant fees while assisting veterans in the preparation of their claims. Current law mandates that VA has a duty to assist in the initial claims preparation process. This duty exists to ensure that there are no financial barriers to veterans in having their claims prepared and adjudicated, and that veterans experience a non-adversarial process. Moreover, there are thousands of veteran service officers around the country who are willing and able to assist veterans for free. And those service officers have been vetted by VA both for their character and competency. So in the spirit of ensuring that veterans are made aware that they are entitled to this preparation assistance, the Veterans Claims Education Act mandates that VA websites prominently give veterans notice that they are entitled to free assistance from an accredited representative and how to find that assistance. Not only does it alert the veteran that they are entitled to assistance in their claims preparation at no cost, but it also provides guidance on reporting bad actors like unaccredited claim sharks. VA's accreditation process serves to protect our nation's veterans from financial exploitation so that veterans are less likely to be at risk of incurring outrageous debts as well as losing out on months of their benefits. Few people would think there is value in letting someone take 5 months of our paychecks just for reviewing our resume, right? Then why would we ever be even remotely comfortable with someone taking 5 months of earned benefits away from our veterans? I strongly support this bipartisan bill as it would promote those actors who are doing claims preparation and processing the right way, not the ones who pay to be the first result on an internet search. I thank Representative Peters for introducing this legislation. This bill allows us to direct veterans to representatives who have the skills, knowledge, and accreditation to help them, not to take advantage of them during the initial claims process. So today, I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 1578, and not just to stop there. I also urge them to continue to push back against claim sharks and to support legislation that reinstates the penalties that were in place to hold accountable bad actors who took advantage of veterans for years. So thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the author of H.R. 1578, my colleague from the state of California, the gentleman from my great state, Mr. Scott Peters.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my bill, H.R. 1578, the Veterans Claims Education Act. You know, I wrote this bill after a veteran in my district alerted my office about a challenge he faced accessing his hard-earned VA benefits. This veteran contracted with a for-profit company that promised to increase the veteran's disability benefits in exchange for a cut of the veteran's disability payment from the VA. It's unconscionable that for-profit entities known as claim sharks prey on the trust and goodwill of our veterans to line their own pockets. So my bill takes a big step to correct this and will protect veterans in San Diego and throughout the country from similar scams in the future. The Veterans Claims Education Act provides educational resources to steer veterans toward veteran service organizations and qualified lawyers and VA-accredited entities who can provide not-for-profit assistance to veterans. My bill also provides vets filing a disability claim with an online search tool to help veterans find accredited entities that can assist with claims. It creates an online portal to report claim sharks targeting veterans, which charge a fee for their services. Republicans and Democrats may have sincere policy disagreements about how to provide world-class care to our nation's veterans and their families, but I know we all agree that no one should be able to profit from the service and sacrifice of our veterans. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member and the entire House Veterans Affairs Committee for advancing this legislation out of the House, and the numerous veteran service organizations for their advocacy, including the American Legion, the Paralyzed Veterans of America, the VFW, and other great organizations. I look forward to working with these groups to make this law the law of the land. I urge my colleagues to support the bill and our veterans, and I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman from California yields back to the gentleman from California. The gentleman from California reserves.
I reserve, but I'm prepared to close as well.
I'm prepared to close.
So the gentleman from Illinois is going to reserve as well. So the gentleman from California is recognized.
Yes, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask all my colleagues to join me in passing H.R. 1578, the Veterans Claims Education Act of 2025, as amended. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Speaker, once again, I encourage all members to support this legislation. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois yields, and the time for debate having passed, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1578 as amended? Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The chair lays before the House a message. The clerk will read.
To the Congress of the United States, consistent with applicable law, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act 50 U.S.C. 1701, the National Emergency Act 50 U.S.C. 1601, Section 604 of the Trade Act of 1974 as amended, 19 U.S.C. 2483, and Section 301 of Title III United States Code, I hereby report that I have issued an executive order on modifying reciprocal tariff rates to reflect discussions with the People's Republic of China. In Executive Order 14257 of April 2, 2025, regulating imports with a reciprocal tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to large and persistent annual United States goods trade deficits, I declare a national emergency arising from conditions reflected in large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits, and impose additional ad valorem duties to that I deemed necessary and appropriate to deal with that unusual and extraordinary threat, which has in source, in whole or substantial part outside the United States, to the national security and economy of the United States. Section 4B of Executive Order 14257 provided that, should any trading partner retaliate against the United States in response to this action through import duties on U.S. exports or other measures, I may further modify the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States to increase or expand in scope the duties imposed under this order to ensure the efficiency of this action. Since I signed Executive Order 14266 of April 9, 2025, modifying reciprocal trade rates to reflect trading partner retaliation and alignment, the United States has entered into discussions with the People's Republic of China, PRC, to address a lack of trade reciprocity in our economic relationship and our resulting national and economic security concerns. Conducting these discussions is a significant step by the PRC toward remedying non-reciprocal trade arrangements and addressing the concerns of the United States relating to economic and national security matters. As a result of this significant step, pursuant to Section 4C of Executive Order 14257, this order modifies the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States to suspend for a period of 90 days application of the additional ad valorem duties imposed on the PRC listed in Annex 1 to Executive Order 14257 as amended by Executive Order 14259 of April 8, 2025, amendment to reciprocal tariffs and updated duties as applied to low-value imports from the People's Republic of China, and Executive Order 14266, and clarified in the Presidential Memorandum of April 11, 2025, clarification of exemptions under Executive Order 14257 of April 2, 2025 as amended, and to instead impose on articles of the PRC an additional ad valorem rate of duty as set forth in the order pursuant to the terms of and except as otherwise provided in Executive Order 14257 as modified by this order. My administration will continue to consult with the Congress on our efforts to address extraordinary and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits. I'm enclosing a copy of the executive order I have issued. Signed, Donald J. Trump, the White House, May 19, 2025.
The message is referred to the Committees on Foreign Affairs and Ways and Means and ordered printed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until approximately 6:30 p.m. today.